insurance. Hello. How's everybody doing? Thumbs up on day 2? Good. Do a little wave. That was really sad. Okay, well, I'm going to let that one go. Welcome to our second faculty event of the week. My name is David Simpson. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center, and thank you for coming. We're really glad to see all of you. We do these faculty events Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, every night, all summer long. It's free and open to the public, where we get to listen to our esteemed and lovely faculty members do readings and artist talks all summer long. So as long as you are here, I hope you will come to these events. Tonight, we're going to hear from poet Porsha Olayiwola. And visual artist Rubens Ghenov. Porsha will read from her book, and Rubens will give an artist talk. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. If you were here last night, this will all be old news to you, so bear with me. Porsha's books will be available for sale at the back of the room, and she will be signing books after the event. And there are books from the other faculty members who are here this week, also at the back of the room. And there are books in the gallery, in the middle part of the gallery, of all of this year's faculty, past year's faculty, past year's fellows. It's a really rich arrangement of books in the back, all supplied and managed for us by East End Books. So a big hand of applause for our partners, East End Books. Speaking of the gallery, we have a wonderful show this summer. If you haven't seen it, please do check it out. It's called Everyone We Know Is Here. It's curated by former Falk Fellow Heidi Hahn, and it features work by former fellows. It's a wonderful show, really beautiful stuff. All of it is for sale, and all the proceeds go to benefit the artists and the Fine Arts Work Center. So check it out after the show. Let's see here. The bathrooms continue to be down the hall, and the sign-up sheet is still on the table over here. And I noticed that it is halfway full. So round of applause for everybody who has signed up. I know it takes bravery, big hand for people who have signed up. If you haven't signed up, please do so. It'll be one of the best decisions you make all week. And finally, please turn your cell phones. No phones at the table. Okay, so now I'd like to invite we're going to hear first from Porsha, and I'd like to welcome one of her students, Nala Washington, to the stage to introduce Porsha. Nala, come on up.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Nala Washington. I am currently a senior at Susquehanna University. I'm so excited to be attending the Fine Arts Work Center this week on a BIPOC scholarship from SU. I'm even more ecstatic to be introducing this dope spoken word artist I am currently learning from this week. A Chicago native, Porsha Olayiwola life and work, quote, reimagines the past and outlives the present on her own terms, end quote. She made her mark in the poetry scene first by dominating the stage in the form of slam poetry and spoken word. In this mode, she won the 2014 Individual Poetry Slam and the 2015 National Poetry Slam. Based out of Boston, she holds a BA in African American Studies, Gender and Women's Studies from the University of Illinois, along with an MFA in Poetry from Emerson College. She has penned her first collection of poetry, I Shimmer Sometimes Too, along with a spread of other writings in or forthcoming from TriQuarterly Magazine, the Boston Global, Essence Magazine, Netflix, and various others. One of the first poems I heard by Porsha was Water. I was in poetry club way back in high school, and I randomly chose the video on button poetry I thought looked interesting. Her take on the Black experience and the history captured me. I continued to watch her videos throughout all these years, captivated by her words and how she unapologetically used her voice to amplify her experience, our experiences, for everyone to hear. Porsha, you're literally one of the main reasons why I write today. Porsha's mission, along with writing poetry, also led her to create the Roxbury Poetry Festival. She has notably been Brown University's Heimark Artist in Residence and is the current Poet Laureate of Boston. When putting her dreams and words into action, Porsha offers this: "If I name my future, write the future I wish to see, perhaps it will give others permission to do the same." Please welcome Porsha Olayiwola.
That was like the best introduction I've ever had in my entire life. But seriously, it's so, it's well written relative to my own, the one I wrote. So thank you, Nala. And definitely feel like a student in my own class, which is exciting and really the reason I like lead workshops or facilitate workshops. So thank y'all. And thank you again, Nala. Thank you to the Fine Arts Work Center for having me this week and for like hosting us. David, Bree, Miracle, Sharon, Sarah, and folks that I haven't named, and folks that are doing work like cleaning when we leave and transitioning quickly. I'm gonna read some poems and try not to go over time, but we'll see. I've got my timer here. And then David said I was reading poems from my book, but I'm really reading poems from a manuscript. And I think Nala's introduction was perfect because I've been obsessed with water, the Black diaspora, queer intimacy. So I think that's where we'll go. This first is an erasure of itself, and it's called Inquiry into the Lineage of Watermelons. And it's after a 1904 entry in the student file of Alfred de Grasse, member of the Wampanoag Nation. Watermelon is a flowering plant species in the Cucurbitaceae family, a family of gourds. Its scientific name, Citrullus latinus, is borrowed from Greek and Latin and translates to citrus of wool or woolly citrus, characterizing the plant's seed. The watermelon is a scrambling vine plant that bursts yellow flowers and a large fruit. The fruit is effectively a berry with a calloused rind. The flesh is a deep red to light pink with black seeds splattered across the inside. The rind is striped and is described as a mid to dark green. Sweet and composed of 91% water, the plant is a refreshing nibble from the heat of simmer or while watching television. It can be cut and tossed into salads or juiced. Watermelon has a multitude of uses and over 1,000 different breeds. Highly cultivated, the watermelon is grown in tropical or temperate regions and is reported as having a climbing habit. The watermelon is both male and female and also neither. Notably, however, the female plant bears the brunt of the fruit, having an existence recognized as far back as 30 BC. The watermelon originated in West Africa. Its present globalization can be attributed to European colonizers who enslaved Africans during the triangular slave trade. Africans carried the ancestral knowledge of the berry. The fruit was a popular crop amongst freed blacks during the antebellum and became a symbol of freedom. 2, inquiry into lineage. A flowering plant species, family of gourds, borrowed, of wool or scrambling, bursts of fruit with calloused flesh, deep black splattered across, sweet and composed, nibble heat of summer, cut, tossed, or juice, multitude of use, grown, and is reported a climbing brunt fruit. Existence as far back as the watermelon. Slave ancestral, a crop freed became. And 3, lineage. Species of wool, bursts of flesh, splattered sweet as watermelon. This poem, I've just been obsessed, also the class is on obsession, with Whitney Houston, who, I just love for a variety of reasons. Obviously, her talent, also her being queer and Black, and more specifically as it relates to this work, she, drowned in a bathtub. And then some years later, her daughter also drowned in a bathtub. So this poem is in 3 parts as well, and a contrapuntal. And so I'll read it one side, and then I'll read the next side, and then I'll read it across. And the first is called The Chorus. They say it's an eerie tale. A singer's voice gets warped into a hubris addiction. A woman curdling to keep the eyes of her man. Every devotion is tragedy. Every prayer a prison. Most women die, screaming for a saving grace, and still are buried in the tunnel of the throat, between the glits in their husband's grin. The body of a woman is white magic, and at any time can take on the shape of grief, become a rock concert and a funeral, while simultaneously a crack pitch at the end of a solo run. And how will Nip be remembered? A record, a hit, a hiss, a fist, a chalk line sprawled across, always around and inside her, a dark womb, always below her, a dark party waiting to burst, obituary pretty, meet my maker ready, when there is nothing left on this earth to love. 2, the chorus on the subject, Bobby Christina. Daughter gets wrapped in the image of her creator. They say I was a bad oracle, Oedipus ache, a mother's love, cradling her baby to the grave. It's true. We all want to be the gods we come from, and some girls die, being the grace, saving their mothers. Wretched Mira, Ophelia curse, girls who drowned in a bath tomb of porcelain. What spectacle. Everything I want. The tip of my tiny vocal range, a roll and oh, ah, and suddenly I am just like my mother, spliced and split strand, a double helix duo, a dance on a stage illuminated by foreshadow. If I am my mother's best song, am I never myself? And if I am the child to a supernova, does that make us a fading glimmer, matter star, the crescendo of a black hole? Mother God, take me with you. I can't find a thing I love whose name I know to pronounce. And the third across, the chorus on the subject, Bobby Christina and Whitney Houston drowning in a bathtub 3 years apart. They say it's an eerie tale. A singer's daughter gets wrapped in the image of her creator. Voice warped into a hubris addiction. They say I was a bad oracle, Oedipus ache, a woman curdling to keep the eyes of her man, a mother's love cradling her baby to the grave. Every devotion is tragedy, every prayer a prison. It's true. We all want to be the gods we come from, and most women die screaming for a saving grace. Some girls die being the grace saving their mothers, and still are buried in the tunnel of the throat. Wretched Mira, Ophelia curse, girls who drowned between the glits and their husbands grin in a bath tomb of porcelain. What spectacle. The body of a woman is white magic, and at any time, everything I want, the tip of my tiny vocal range can take on the shape of grief, become a rock, a roll, an oh, an ah, and suddenly I am just like my concert and a funeral, while simultaneously mother. Spliced and split strand, a double helix duel, a crack pitch at the end of a solo run, a dance on stage illuminated by foreshadow, and how will Nip be remembered? A record. If I am my mother's best song, am I never a hit, a hiss, a fist, a chalk line sprawled across myself? And if I am the child to a supernova, always around and inside her a dark room, does that make us a fading glimmer, matter star? Always below her a dark party waiting to burst, the crescendo of a black hole, mother god. Obituary pretty, meet my maker ready, take me with you. I can't find a thing I love. There's not a thing left on this earth to love, whose name I know to pronounce. So I've secretly been working on that poem for a very long time. And it has this version that also includes Cissy Houston. I can't really figure it out yet. This is like relatively new, things that I've just been kind of playing with it. I'm just gonna go through them. They're like relatively short. This verse, before he was deported, my father taught me to fish like a man. Good man, my father was. He could catch the best God had to offer and the worst. Like devout fishermen, we were religious at the lake. My image swimming in my father's reflection. Girl learning man, man, girl learning to eat, to cast a line like how the country did. Split a border between my father and I, halved like a fillet, croakers flopping onto the beach of our mother countries. It took years to learn how to unlearn anger. I wanted only to drown in the blood of my father, cast away, body bone swallowed up, how hunger never allows you to keep who it is you love best. Sorry, I don't even know what's on this paper. I'm just giving you guys. I was like, what am I gonna read? Oh, let me just do some drafts. Here we are. This is like my first memory. But I don't actually have a memory of it. I only have a photo of it. But it haunts me, you know what I mean? I don't remember the first time I visited Chuck E. Cheese. I think I am 1 year old, or maybe a few months shy. There is a photo. I am wearing white and red, surrounded by red, blue, yellow balls. I am in a pit. On my face, a frown twists. My eyes are wide, pupils endless. I am not crying, but I feel as though I am just about to, or have just finished, or that I should be crying. That is, though my cheeks are dry and plump, chubby as a spear. I am a small planet. Perhaps I don't like the feel of warm plastic. Maybe the pen smells of moist socks, a pile of sweaty shoes. I look terrified. I can feel fear, even though I am not currently in the indoor amusement park, even though I'm here with you, reader. I can smell the terror, even though I've aged, like the corners of the photo, which, by the way, are all colored a deep pitchless black. I assign my students final presentations. The student says, skinny black trees, and all I think is black. Skinny black kids, skinny black legs dangling off the side of lips like lollipops, skinny black limbs, skinned knees, black with hope, skinned black hope so thin it vanishes like a line lynched on the horizon. What's right with me? Am I wired to think lack? A gravekeeper, pallbearer, whose child? Rancid with morbidity am I? Do I belong to God? Is God bound back to black like this, all rope and loose neck, all cross and clean hands, no skinny blood spilled, and still grief coffles my mouth like a chain gang? The student finishes. A. No, A+. I love that you guys are like clapping in between. This is like a good sign. No. I'm judging myself for this title, but the working title is Runaway Love. Amid crisis, there exists no sanctuary better than us. Me and my baby moisten the sheets. Our salt spray, asterisks, making the risk of loving, living worth it. We North Star our bed, ancient maroon and heat. I've heard many make the case. Revolution is the time to fuck shit up and not fuck each other. Liminal. God is a ruthless lover. Black is a limitless being. We are always opportune. Name a mutiny that has not been moist in its end. Reader, what did you think? Salves did not fornicate, did not enjoy the moonlight salivating the skin. You think there was no uprising every night, slave shack-ups, heavy painting, wet wade and want. We aim to be that thirsty. We ache to be that thirsted after. My girl and me, a sweet swarm. We this free every break of dawn. Sometimes I eat. Once, out of anger, I told a lover I wanted to gobble her up, devour her bones until we were both dust. I am that thirsty. I thirst for a meal forged from the dainty fingers that feed me. Once, just the two of us had a picnic alongside a river, and I slurped the whole bank of water between my cheeks. Bass, perch, newt, eel, and all. I did not stop. I did not leave the city a drop of blood. In bed, I say grace before I swallow. I swallow. When I am alone, I skip over my prayers. The hunger is enough to forsake my God body. I cheated. Confession. Sometimes I play with my food because I am enamored with the sounds. I slosh my face in her wide mouth, nape of breasts, nails, toes, licked, even the eyeballs, like bad apples, ravished and ravish ready. Sweetie pie, you are not a term of endearment. Starved, I want all of you consumed. Famished, I desire all of me gone. I make love like a burning church, with the title being a line from Douglas Kearney. And it begins with an epigraph from Cardi B that reads, dead ass, big girls got the best pussy. Love, like violence, requires there be a casualty splayed. Think yourself too big and someone will lay you out. Think myself too big and someone still lays me out. My first said she liked to be smothered in thigh. My second liked to be mothered between thighs. Gluttonless, a blessing of lovers enter in. Gluttonless, a blessing of lovers enter and remain. Some saints abandon their God to save themselves. Some gods abandon their saints to save themselves. Amid praise and worship, the church is engulfed. Omit praise and worship, I become engulfed. Any cathedral can become a mausoleum. Any woman can become a mausoleum. I, like violence, required a casualty to be splayed. Yeah, the clap stopped once we got to the sex poems. No. I'm kidding. All right, so I'm gonna do two-ish, 1 in 3 parts. We'll do that. Just some weird stuff, My therapist says I should be more vulnerable about what I want. And if I'm being honest, I think about you eating baked macaroni and Gouda off my boobs. I think about biting into a ham hock and chowing down a plate of collards and then slithering the juices between your thighs. Slide. I am black with desire. I hunger history. Obese thirst. Is this what she means? Open myself. I whisper, fuck me like a runaway baby. Tall grass. I whimper, pull my hair. I'll eat your lips. Nibble my nipples scarlet, open my legs, open my mouth, feel me, trickle down, tickle my lungs. There are only so many places to feel safe. Make me tender, like fried chicken, hush pussy, but make me scream your name. I'll cry out like a feast of fried gator. Let my tongue soggy your toes, fine painted like green beans, like jalapeno poppers, like safe watermelon woman, okra slime. Slurp me up, serve me up, keep me hoppin' John. Let's fester like wet sugar. Love me like freedom, baby, till the pig ears roast crisp. And then I'll close on this one, back to the water. This poem is about Rodney King, who I think is probably the first infamous, almost, recorded police brutality incident. And if folks know, he won the case, whatever that means, but then moved through his life and eventually drowned in a swimming pool, right, in his own swimming pool. And I just think about living through that, or like surviving that, if one does survive it, right? And then also choosing water as in a way. So this poem is trying to grapple with all of that. And the first, it's also a contrapuntal. The first is called Rodney King Mistakes the Deep End of His Swimming Pool for the Atlantic. Dry land ain't never been for black folk. The earth taketh away, swallowing who it knows to be a grieving thing, whom else incites a fire, ignites a riot, a billy club, built a man from dust. A nigga was only heading home, and now home is a camera flash, a drowning in a bottle and bathtub. I'm sure there is a dirge looping that Rodney fell into, a hell opening again, except each time you reach God, you unbecome. And where do you go after you've been resurrected in the flesh? And is that where black is? LA asphalt cross? No, water is softer. A baptismal in a pool, a communion of blood can be an ocean. 2, or police brutality is a middle passage, is a flood. The water knows this. As a nigga cometh, so shall then a nigga depart. Ask the ocean, how many came by sea, by salt? Salt water has a perfect memory, so be it. All of us are trying to get back to where we came from. Rodney gave up the ghost like his daddy, both on Father's Day. There is a quote about lineage that doesn't quite fit, but no, not much fits nor opens except death, except think of this more as unborn. And where do you go if you are unborn? A womb, a backyard swimming pool? Is that holy enough? A hole at the bottom of the sea, we promise we are always looking for a way home. And last, Rodney King mistakes the deep end of his swimming pool for the Atlantic, or police brutality is a middle passage, is a flood. Dry land ain't never been for black folk. The water knows this. As a nigga, the earth taketh away, swallowing who cometh. So shall then a nigga depart, asks the ocean. It knows to be a grieving thing, whom else, how many came by sea, by salt, salt water incites a fire, ignites a riot, a billy club has a perfect memory, so be it. All of us are built. A man from dust, a nigga was only trying to get back to where we came from, heading home, and now home is a camera flash. Rodney gave up the ghost like his daddy, a drowning in a bottle and bathtub, both on Father's Day. There is a quote, I'm sure. There is a dirge looping about lineage that doesn't quite fit, but know that Rodney fell into a hell opening again, except not much fits nor opens except death, except each time you reach God, you unbecome. Think of this more as unborn, and where do you go after you've been? And where do you go if you are unresurrected in the flesh and born a womb? Backyard swimming pool, is that where black is? LA asphalt cross, is that holy enough? Whole? No. Water is softer. A baptismal in a pool at the bottom of the CCC. We promise a communion of blood can be an ocean. We are always looking for a way home. Thank you guys so much.
Holy crap. Can we have another big round of applause for Porsha Olayiwola? Thank you, Porsha. Now we're going to hear from Rubens Ghenov, and to introduce Rubens, I'm going to invite our good friend of the Fine Arts Work Center and the person who recommended that I reach out to Rubens to come teach here, Esteban Del Valle. Come on up here, Esteban.
Porsha, thank you. That got me real hard. Rubens Ghenov was born in São Paulo, Brazil, immigrated to the U.S. in 1989. He earned his BFA from Tyler School of Art and later his MFA from RISD. His work has been featured in Art in America, Hyperallergic, The Village Voice, and Bomb Magazine. In addition, his art has been shown in both solo and group exhibitions in venues including Morgan Lehman Gallery, Mindy Solomon Gallery, Geoffrey Young Gallery, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Of the differing modes that Ghenov operates within this exploration, it's been noted that he lies at the intersection of fact and fiction, where painting, storytelling, sound comprise the preponderance of his work. Currently, he is based in Knoxville, where he teaches painting and drawing at the University of Tennessee. I've had the great privilege of knowing Rubens going back to our time at grad school together at RISD. I was thinking how to introduce Rubens, and I thought of a great, I don't remember the name of the biopic, but it was about Coleridge and Wordsworth and their early relationship as they were writing poems together. And there's this scene where they were like, gentlemen of leisure. And there was a scene where there was one of their house servants was cleaning up, and he just lost his shit on him. Was just like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, I'm just cleaning, because they were just laying out on the couches and stuff. And he was like, never do that. He was like, I don't care if we're laying in a field looking at flowers. Do not assume we're not working. And I tell my students that because a lot of times artists have the problem of acknowledging that thinking and reflecting is part of the process. And it's just as heavy of material, especially if you come from like working class, middle class, the idea of leisure and thinking time is something that isn't really given as much credibility as the formal process of things. And Rubens, I known his work and followed it for years. However, I hadn't heard him speak about it since grad school until we were both teaching at Anderson Ranch. And I was just blown away at what 10 years had done to this mind. I don't want to give too much away, but I would just like to end with saying that Rubens, I thought of this, Rubens, it came naturally, you're gonna love this. I was like, Rubens is the cross between Joseph Beuys and MF Doom. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Rubens Ghenov.
I'm type of crying, fam. Yeah, thank you so much, Porsha. I'm not low-key shook. I'm dead-ass shook. I gotta put the timer as well, because Brazilians, they just keep rapping. Thank you, Esteban. I love you with all my heart. That's ill. Thank you. I will try not to cry. Anyway, I got 20 minutes. Let's move. Word. Deus do céu. Here we go. Wow. I'm going to read because I talk too much. So, beautifully enough, I'm surrounded by poets, which I think all of us artists know it's the highest form of art, and that's why we paint, sing, and write, and do all these things. And Est is completely correct that we never leave the studio. Word is bond, right? Hopefully I won't cry. I'm still mad shook. Anyway, so in a common denominator effort, there potentially may be two routes that could be taken: an aerial view and a terrestrial one. Artists usually take the former to holistically catalyze the impetus of the latter. Where one is born, lives, is influenced, nurtured, thinks. In 20 minutes, it might be more suitable to do the earthly sibling, and perhaps the questionnaire would catapult us back to the aerial somehow. Thusly, I'll start in Faro, Portugal, for the night. This is a photograph apparently taken in Japan depicting a person between two large trees. This person, though appearing small, is actually kneeling. The back of the photograph produced the words cork, wax, gum arabic, and mud. Circa 2009, I began reading Borges's Labyrinths. I came across the short story titled The Sect of the Phoenix, wherein Borges details a secret society prevalent across the globe, spanning centuries, whose only attribute was a strange ritual practice involving 3 arcane or perhaps 4 items. The act in itself is trivial, momentary, and requires no description. The materials are cork, wax, or gum arabic. In the liturgy, mud is mentioned. This is often used as well. Borges, as many can attest to, often fused historical events and fictive structures as his modus operandi, stacking worlds atop other worlds. And since this praxis of conflation mixed quote-unquote fact with fiction, I often had a difficult time knowing which was which, simultaneously got turned on to things that took place in the world that I was unaware of. So I began researching groups of people who might have had esoteric rituals utilizing cork, wax, gum arabic, and mud in ceremonies, healing praxis, religious rites, and the sort, but to no avail. Until 2011, when I came across a Spaniard newspaper article, an obituary-like account from 2006, acquainting the Spanish people with the death of one of its poets, Angelico Morandá, whose work had never been published. The newspaper reads, "A strange ritual in the woods utilizing 4 items, which appeared in a short story by renowned Argentine author Jorge Luis Borges: cork, wax, gum arabic, and shards of a clay vase." Through various library loans, I finally came across a book called Anécdotas de las Vidas Poéticas, written by Uruguayan journalist turned author Alfreda Aguiar, later translated in English, strangely, by a Brazilian. Her name is Noricema Washington. The book details customs or traditions of a selection of Latin American poets that parallel their writing, one of which is Angelico Morandá. Wow, that's mad dark, sorry. So I read, Morandá subsequently relocated to Faro, Portugal, though his reasoning might have carried arcane measures being based on specific calculations seemingly rigged in cartography, literature, West African spirituality, and the latter's syncretism in South America. Morandá's immigration to its Iberic neighbor was indefinite. Most importantly, what appears to have been the fulcrum of such impetus was a meditative practice the poet apparently self-concocted. In the woods, Moranda would allocate himself between two trees and kneel upright with a linen shroud covering his head. This cloak of sorts had the sides slit open, denuding the ears to the elements, so that he could hear the sound of the forest as well as those he would record on cassettes. Sparse sounds experimentations that at times were almost undiscernible. Besides shroud and cassette player, he would also bring 4 items to this meditation. These are the elements that led me to discover Angelico Moranda. These articles are cork, gum arabic, wax, and shards of a clay vase, all of which are found. Head, knees, and feet connect orthogonally. This this triangle motif appeared rife in his journals and copious notebooks, referencing the connections he was making cartographically with the names of cities, boundaries between states, meridian lines, and the sort. Faro is not only a town found in the coast of Portugal, but also a Scandinavian sea island off mainland Sweden's south coast and a municipality in the state of Pará in the northern region of Brazil. These 3 towns with the same designation create a perfect diagonal line. As an amateur Egyptologist, Moranda's interests look to the plumb line dividing Egypt and Libya and another major aspect of his research, the equator. All of these points on the map assemble the image of a triangle. This is a Portuguese publication called Oratório. This issue is devoted to certain aspects around 4 authors' lives. You can see them down at the bottom there. This is an image of Fernando Pessoa, whom you more than likely know. And in the section that's allotted to Moranda, images taken for that newspaper article, which never were printed, are shown here in their negative state, depicting the Borges items in Moranda's apartment posthumously. As well as one of these objects, which is the 5th object, which was a cassette player Moranda would take to these meditations. He would create these cassette tape loops on his kitchen table and play them while kneeling between these 2 trees, along with the Borgesian items. This is an image of the shroud that would cover his head and where the slits would be open to denude the ears to the elements. And this is the cartographic explanation that he had. Strangely enough, Porsha also talked about the triangular space that all of us born in this side of the world have this triangle somehow embedded in our existence. Not somehow embedded in our existence all the time. And Moranda, this triangle was found in all of his writings, copious notebooks, and the sort. If you see up top is Faro with the umlaut. It's in Sweden. The middle Faro is where he relocated to. He was born in Salamanca, Spain, and moved to Faro based on specific calculations that he was making, utilizing all his research and these cartographies. And then a Faro, again, in the state of Pará in the northern region of Brazil, as well as his research dealt heavily with the equator, but most importantly and central to his practice was the Congo. And this line that splits Egypt and Libya almost acted like an arrow to point down to the equator, closing this specific triangle, yeah? And so the shape of the right triangle appeared, again, numerously in notebooks, annotated corners of manuscript, maps, books, poems. Check my time here. And slowly, the triangle began to permeate into my own research and into my own paintings. So I'm just going to show a few. Apologies for some of this. I use a lot of dark areas in my paintings, so in terms of how things are going, you might not see some, but the triangles are vividly apparent everywhere. The majority of these paintings are, been telling my crew, I've been an acrylic painter for quite a long time, and the majority of these are 20 by 16 linen covering wood panels, and then I paint on acrylic. The majority of the work is almost untainted by paint, oftentimes, to reflect this, the linen that shrouded his head whilst in the woods. I'm gonna move mad fast through these images because I have like enormous amount of slides. Yeah. Thank you, fam. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate this. These are going from all over the place. These are not in chronological order, but I just wanted to showcase where the triangle ends up becoming a bit of a protagonist, if you will, yeah? This painting is called Necklace Abrupt, after Takemitsu. Another rife symbol that constantly surfaces in his writing, drawings, annotations, and diagram is the shape of the circle. This delineation here is called the Dikenga, the Congo cosmogram, which depicts the 4 movements of the sun that correlate to the 4 stages of life. On the right circle here is the rising of the sun, signifying the birth. The middle is noon, which signifies the maturity of one's life or earthly life. The left circle there is the setting of the sun, talking about death. And then the bottom circle is midnight, which is life after death, or the life of the ancestors. This horizontal line dividing the top of the circle from the bottom is the intersection between ancestors and the living. And by the way, if you have not read, this is taking a lot of my research, and I don't know about Moranda, but a lot of my research comes from a specific book by Robert Farris Thompson called Flash of the Spirit. And so it kind of displays this physical earthly existence above and the spiritual ancestral below. The vertical line often will talk about the desire to connect with ancestors for their wisdom, for guidance. This, again, was rife in Moranda's writings. And so there's a plethora of other examples where the circle and this symbolic structure appear throughout his research, too. This is a segment about Ramon Llull, who was a pre-Renaissance alchemist, who also talked about the circle quite a lot. And so I'm going to show paintings now that bespeak of this circle. And these range in size. Again, this one is 48 by 60 inches. This goes back to being a small 20 by 16. But one of the things that I've been really interested in, as a kid, I was always interested in jewelry and clothes, shoes, loved going to these flea markets where my dad was like, yo, why are you always trying to get jewelry and stuff? I've always been fascinated by the language of Brazilian music in talking about accoutrements. The late Gal Costa, who was a big person for me, sang a song that dealt with earrings. So I've been wanting to put earrings on my paintings for a long time. And where am I thinking here? And so the earring came together when I began to conjoin the triangle and the circle in both both conditions in his work. And I've came across this book by Otávio Paz, the Mexican poet and diplomat, who begins to talk about the conditions of what a mantra is, which is a sound unit for the sake of meditation, for the sake of thought. And I began to think about the earrings as this condition of two things coming together, a vowel and a consonant, in order to make this mantra. And so I treat my paintings and think of my paintings as mantras in the process of forming, or in the process of osmosis, or being osmosed altogether. And the earrings, for me, when fully osmote, is when they become this teardrop shape that you see in the paintings. And sometimes they are coming in and out of one another, floating upside, being next to these texts, which for me are books, or half-written poems, or unpublished matter. I believe the majority of these are 20 by 16. That's Gal Costa's eye, actually. I use a lot of her eyes in a lot of these paintings. This is probably the second horizontal painting I've made in the last 20 years. Most of this ish is all vertical, anyway. And again, these are not chronologically spaced at all. Another compositional framework in the paintings comes from what Morandá termed as the U-shaped choir. This comes expressly from the architectonics of this meditative site that he would get between two trees, forming two walls, and the earth grounding both trees in a U shape, where the top signifies ushering of the cosmos above. And the angularity of the trees to the ground present this 90-degree angle, which also comes from his respect and research of the Yoruba and Ahomian spiritual foundations. Outlined under here, it says, where other cultures might conceive of the physical and the metaphysical as at best a parallelism, a necessarily irreconcilable dualism, the Haitian peasant resolves this relationship in the figures of right angles, as well as all these cartographical drawings that he was doing, and this, I don't know if you would call it an obsession, but it's very, very replete in his writing, is this fascination with the equator and the Congo, which this kind of line from Egypt and Libya going down to the Congo close the triangle and create this specific, very important to his practice, a 90-degree angle, which then he will bring back to the place where these meditations would take place, creating this U shape. Akin again to the place where this person is located. This is not Morandá. This is a very old photograph that precedes Morandá by a good 50 years of this person in this Japanese forest. And so these are some paintings with the U-shaped choir. If I were giving you an area view, I would talk about important genre of painting that comes from South Korea from the 19th century called chaekori, which are paintings on screens of shelves with accoutrements in them. It's almost as if you're looking at 100 paintings in one painting, which has been a huge mantra for me as well. But the U shape is creating these shelf-like structures in the painting. I promise I'm almost done, yeah? And to go back to this mud condition, Morandá was known to bring into the wood these shards of clay vessels that would accompany these items from the Borges sect of the Phoenix. And though there are no images of these specific fragments from him, I somewhat became transfixed by a collection of vases from a digital archive from the New York Public Library that I began then printing them onto the paintings. A couple of those prints you can see in earlier paintings. And then I later started making collages and drawing on the Xeroxes. And during a residency that I did, I scanned these and blew them up to 40 by 30 on canvas and printed them to paint on them, kind of like this. The vases back then, not because it's a vase, but just so you give you a scale of what these joints look like. I took the image and I was like, dude, that's so dumb. You put the vase back there. But this notion of the vase is like replete. So for me, like this is a vase in here, yeah. I think this is called Still Life with Hair. And so you can see here the vase is being printed. You know, oftentimes people put me into shows that deal with abstraction, whereas I really think that I'm a still life painter that is maybe painting accoutrements or arrangements that are like deep inside the psyche. So it was good for me to be in shows like this where people actually dealt with objects. So here you can see an example of the collage becoming a canvas and a painting. Lately I've been really interested in shelving the paintings outside of the larger paintings and also thinking about the paintings interchangeably changing all the time. The painting on the right is something that I've been working a lot. The image, it's kind of dark, but there's a sort of an image on the left there in green, and I've been looking at a lot of books, looking at deities from the Congo, because of Moranda's research and interest, but also in terms of my family lineage from my mother's side. The 8 generations back goes back to a woman named Theodora, who was the daughter of a Congolese woman and a Portuguese merchant. And so I've been thinking a lot about that space, the space that is usually a ghost space, a space that is in between these deities, that some photographer put them together without knowing where these things come from. And I've been really thinking about the notion of making the unseen seen, giving the negative shape a positive shape, so that they can be, what's the word? Contemplated upon, yeah. So for me, these shapes are guardians. And the guardians are often in front of these books without the text. And the books without the text that just have that kind of facture, for me, they're asleep books. So these paintings are of asleep books with the guardians adjacent to them. And I've been thinking about these asleep books, of all the books that have been burned throughout history, the banned books that are going on right now. There's an African proverb that says, when an elder dies, a library burns down. And I've been meditating on this for quite a while, and hoping that these guardians are keeping this knowledge and this wisdom until the day that they can be reawakened anew, yeah. I'm trying to rush. I'm almost done. And these are images of some of the works that I've been working for the last 3 years or so. This is from the last show I had. So these paintings are a bit bigger. These are 40 by 30s. And they have the earrings, they have guardians, they have asleep books, cassette tapes often, necklaces, prayers, meditations, histories. This is when I first met Stephanie. My people's out here. And here's some more images of the work that I'm constantly doing now. This looks unfinished here, but it's finally finished. I've been constantly thinking about 20 by 16 paintings being shelved inside of larger paintings and watch them osmose. The work that's on the wall is from an amazing artist that I was able to have a duo show. Her name is Kentora Davis, and my paintings are there on the floor, which is kind of the way that I've been painting in the studio. So I wanted to put them on stacks of books, and they ended up being stacked on marbles. This is a big earring painting that has this strange trough inside, housing this painting with Gal Costa's eye, with some objects inside as well. There's Pessoa anew. Kentora is a fabulous maker, my God. Little prayers behind the paintings. And much like the triangle that Moranda used, utilized in these calculations, my practice also is a triangle of sorts. I didn't talk much about sound, but every show that I have usually has a soundtrack that loops. I was also stuck, that loops. But one of the things that, in part of my practice of between painting, sound, and storytelling, the thing that gets usually the ghost see is the storytelling aspect. But Moranda himself is a story that I've also created. He's a fictive poet concocted from the three conditions of my practice, which is painting, sound, and storytelling. As you can tell up there, it's Giorgio Morandi, the painter, Borges on the top right, and Stravinsky on the bottom. And I Photoshop or Voltron their body together to make Moranda. Oh, that's nice. Word. I'm done. Please, thank you. Thanks, fam. Appreciate it.
Yeah, why don't you have a seat? Right here. We're gonna have you guys sit over here. One's for you.
Thank you so much.
So we're gonna have a little Q&A. The only thing we ask is that you wait to ask your questions until Sarah or Bree come to you with a microphone, because we're live streaming and we want people to be able to hear your questions as well. So does anybody have a question for Porsha or Rubens?
So this is a question for Porsha, and I was wondering about your process for creating the contrapuntals. Do you do the two sides separately, or what do you do?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You should stop by the class on Thursday. No, I'm just kidding. I tend to do a lot of thinking prior, of just like imagining what's happening between these two bodies, entities, voices. But I do a side by side, usually not in a notebook where I usually write, but just on a blank piece of paper and gridded almost. So I might write 3 lines here and then try to connect it, if that makes sense. So I'm writing them simultaneously and side by side, but give a few lines here, you know. Yeah. But there's a great essay, which if you come tomorrow, we'll be reading. No, but there's a great essay that talks a little bit about writing contrapuntals that suggests ending each line with a verb and starting each line with the noun. I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, I had 2 separate questions, one for Porsha, one for Rubens, but I think they connect now, given that, because I was wondering the same thing. I'm not familiar with that form, Porsha, but I wanted to know more about the origins of it and why it's something that you've kind of gravitated towards. But one thing that I think crossed over that I wanted to ask Rubens was, I know Rubens' work really well, so the whole time I'm like, when's he gonna let him know? When's he gonna let him know? Like, and I was interested in the reveal because I haven't yet seen you do the lecture as a performance in itself. Wow. And I think the poetic form, Porsha, you're using also has this bit of a reveal aspect to it as it resolves in the end. So if you could both speak about that.
Yeah. Am I on? Is this on? I talk loud, but it's cool. It's cool. There we go. Thank you. I saw a lecture by Ralph Lemon once at Tyler. Ralph blew my mind, and I said from then on, every lecture that I have the opportunity to do is after Ralph. He read looking at the screen and had a pile of books and a little lamp, and his head was down, never looked at the screen, and the screen sort of played like a film, and I was completely transported to something else that I was like, as a storyteller, where does my storytelling condition takes place as a visual maker? And so I started thinking about the lectures as a low-key way of telling a story, I rushed and read in unlike a way that I would have liked to have read, you know what I mean? Especially going after Porsha. was
Blaming on me. No,
but the part of that review, I think, is part of the way that I think also paintings operate. They're slow objects. They take a while, especially things that we perhaps don't have associations thereof. You know what I'm saying? What's a triangle? A triangle for me might be something different from Porsha. You know what I mean? And so those things take a while to sort of expose. But I used to keep the fictive poets parafictive. I never told the audience that they were fictive until I had a show and I realized that no, they are also a bodhisattva to me, as well as I am a maker of them. And so then I began to say, this is a fictive poet, which I don't know if my mind cognitively I know the potency of, but it's the way that opening up is something that I'm interested in. So I think it had to move like that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can you tell me the question once more?
I was asking your connection to that form. That was
Contrapuntal, yeah.
Like the history of it, why it's something gravitated towards, and then layered that with the idea of the reveal within its structure.
Yeah. I feel so embarrassed because I've been obsessed with the contrapuntal, but I don't really know an elaborate history of it. It is meant to show conflicting sides, right? Or have two things in conversation or multiple things in conversation. I feel like Tyamba Jess did a lot of work around it in his book Olio, which I believe won the Pulitzer, but it's primarily composed of contrapuntals in the voice of historical figures, but also written as sonnets, right? And I think the reveal, that's so interesting. I love that you're calling it that, because I think part of me is also thinking about it as a non-reveal, or then, an ending that opens, unfortunately, so that there is this moment of like having to retrace and rethink things or learn something new, which I think a poem does, right? It's like we are constantly discovering as we're writing it. And I think for me being drawn to it, I will say that there are like things that I find to be complex. And I don't know necessarily the best way to capture it other than writing about each of the complexities. I think the Rodney King specifically, when it started out, I thought it would be between the swimming pool and a gun, right? Or those two choices, which is not that. I don't even know what it is exactly. Or, there is this woman named Margaret Garner who was an enslaved black woman, ran away from slavery with her family, and once she crossed the Ohio River, she began to kill her children because the slave catchers caught up with her. And then the story goes on, and that they had a trial for her and sold her further down south via the Mississippi River. And then there's all of this other commotion that happens during this trip where the boat capsizes and da-da-da. And, I'm thinking about water. So I'm like, what does the Ohio River and the Mississippi River have to say? And I think by writing that, I didn't know when I was writing it at the time, but the third voice becomes Margaret Garner herself, right? So I don't know. I think by looking at these two things that are side by side, at least for me in my head, it becomes a unveiling or discovery, or then I get to the end and I'm like, this feels more even of an opening. I don't know if that answers.
Porsha, you just kind of answered my question, because I kept thinking about, for both of you, you mentioned elements a lot. I mean, you're being attracted to water, but then the resin and the mud and all these different elements that show up in the work. And I started to wonder how do these elements carry history for you, but also why these elements, like for each of you, why are they kind of your focus at the moment? I do think it's interesting right now with just environmental issues, how we're all kind of being drawn to, the most basic forms of our humanity. So if you could speak more to that.
Yeah. A long time ago, we're doing an obsession class. And I told them immediately my obsession is water, but really it is. And a while ago, I wrote a poem about water. But I felt almost each line could be its own poem. And so I've kind of just been going down that hole of like following that inkling. But I think also, I identify as African American. I identify as Black and African American, which is to say my mother's Black Chicagoan and my father is Nigerian. And so I feel like the diaspora is like my blood, it is in my body. And I can't untangle it from my identity. And naturally, I just think about water. I think of water as the thing that is connecting those identities, those groups of people. I don't know. I guess it never leaves me, if you will. Toni Morrison says, all water has a perfect memory, right? And is forever trying to get back to where it was. And that's how I feel. I feel like attached to that. And like, thinking a little bit about these triangles, the last time I went to see my father, I was like, you have to take me to a slave port right now. And so we went 2 hours to the coast and went and did the like walk of no return. And on that walk, there was this well of water that folks said that, they made, the slave catchers had the water fixed by root workers, and suggested that that they would force all the enslaved folks to drink from that well, and it would give them short-term memory loss, right? Or like make them forget the way home, is how they phrased it. And also like just another tangent of the way in things which move, I think that port specifically went to Brazil, actually. So it's really interesting how, one, all of these things are connected, but I think that learning that moment about the water and that well specifically is probably when I was like, oh, I have to figure more of these things out, or like uncover that lost memory.
I'm an acrylic painter, so water is part of my ammo, yeah. But with the kind, I'll speak formally about it and then more I'll go that route. The paintings have this language of very straight edge conditions. I grew up in São Paulo. São Paulo is filled with Latin high modernist buildings and that are adjacent to big favelas, right? So makeshift houses, the sort of Nebuchadnezzar-like get more brick as they go up, right? But at the bottom, you can see the animation of what clay or cardboard can do at the bottom, yeah. But I started thinking about water as well. I think about water a lot as it relates to the opposite of these forms. If I'm 75% water, I am using water. There's a lot of pores in the painting. And oftentimes the pores are in thinking about these conditions of those of us that have grown up in America, especially in Brazil, where everything has been sort of intertwined for a long time, that our knowledge of ancestors are usually clouded by the color of someone's skin, when more than likely we are all coming from very, very, very specific ancestors that are not that are coming from this. At one point, there was a quagmire, you know what I mean? And we may not see through the skin. But as 75% water, I start thinking about the act of divination in terms of making these pores. I did not grow up in being a devotee of candomblé, macumba, umbanda, of syncretized Afro-religions and Catholicism. But I was always respectful, fascinated, and completely wanted to know more and more and more. And so the notion of divination for me in the paintings are not only contrarian to this high Latin modernism, if you will, but they compose the paintings often. They act as if I am calling out an ancestor for wisdom as to how to put these things together. You know what I mean? I didn't show any other paintings, but there's small paintings that I've been making that are 12 by 12, like the size of vinyl records, where I just pour the water and sort of find faces of ancestors, you know, and then sort of shelve them in the high Latin modernist architectonics of the paintings, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much. First off, thank you both for your contributions tonight. I was blown away by both of you all's offerings. My question is mostly about how you choose to continue your work. We live in a world where like people constantly want something new, something different, right? Is it easy for you, Porsha, to continue to write about water and to find connections with different forms of water, knowing that? And the same question for you, right? There might be people that want you to paint something different or create something different other than shapes. How do you continue to keep yourself there? That would be my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I try to like alleviate the outside world in terms of my own desire. It's more so like, am I tired of writing about water? Maybe, no. But yeah, so I'm like not really focused. I think, and as far as like the outside world, I think the biggest like pressure or stress around producing is producing. Like I think I feel the pressure of whether or not I'm writing enough, or like having new work enough, right? But as far as like keep going, I don't know. There's the thing. It feels infinite. It feels like there's so much more that I need to discover, or like I haven't even talked about the fact that we are 75% water, right? Like if I'm like writing this entire book about water, then you know there's just so much more to say or to discover or to unveil. So I never feel the pressure from the outside world. I think maybe around history, you know, I'm like really into African American studies. That's like, you know, my jam. Okay. But sometimes I'm like, do people even care? Especially I think during the pandemic, I'm like, should I be writing these poems? Aren't there some poems that feel more urgent that I should be writing? So I think I mostly exist in an internal conversation about what I assume people think. And then I think production, like just feeling the weight of a capitalistic world. In terms of art or connected to art. And then when I get tired of writing about water, I write about hunger and desire. And I had this really interesting question last year when I was reading here of the I in the poem, or like, you know, are you ever going to talk about yourself? Which I thought was really interesting. And so I think if there is this pressure, it's more of a prompt. I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I should.
I think that the lineage that we've been taught to think of ourselves as artists, poets, writers is erroneous. Yeah, we don't come from Caravaggio's small paintings that someone could buy because they saw what he could do for a church that was big. I think our lineage is a spiritual lineage that goes to all those people who built Egypt, right? All those images, they more than likely didn't consider them to be art that would later be stored in a museum. These things were specifically siphoning the unseen and make it seen, yeah? It doesn't matter where we go, India, Egypt, China, all of these things are, so it is a spiritual practice no matter how we see it. And I think realizing that early on in my life, not early on, but maybe a bit ago, that I was just like, okay, this isn't about art world markets, this is a spiritual practice, yeah. And where's Bond, yeah? And I think that the conditions of that alleviate that notion of people saying the world doesn't need any more objects, We can only evolve if we make objects, Poetry also being an object, I think. There's no way I don't think, to evolve without it, And then we can look historically and see how those things planned out. Nina Simone said, right, the artist's job is to tell it like it is. And Bell Hooks built on that and said, an artist's job is not only to tell it like it is, but also to imagine what is possible. And that imagination, I think, is that building structure where these objects are important to humans and will outlive all these isms that we find ourselves so, suffocated by, That has actually nothing to do with why we do what we do, so we just keep doing it, Yeah.
Y'all give it up for Rubens.
Give it up for Rubens.
Writer Seema Reza and photographer David Hillier.